All right, it's 6:02. CIMers, welcome to CIM University number 4. Topic tonight is perfecting the taper and preparing for race weekend. It's a great topic. We've had a great a great series of CIM universities over the past 2+ months or so. Real quick, my name is Scott Abbott. I'm the executive director of the Sacramento Running Association. We are the organization that puts on the California International Marathon. And the CIM University is a great part of the offerings, resources that we provide runners to help you be as successful as you can at the California International Marathon, which is, I know, why we're all here tonight. We're 2.5 weeks out from race day. I know I probably set off a lot of anxiety bells right there just by mentioning that. But we've had as I mentioned, a great series of CIM universities. We started all the way back in August with our first topic, which was about training. And I know many of you that are running your first marathon, or maybe just trying to train a little more seriously to run a faster marathon, we're staring at a daunting training schedule when we had that topic back in August. And then here we are just 2 months later, and you're at the back end of that, and you put in so much work, and it's so great to see how far we've come. And here we are now. We're going to be trying to tonight help you guys sharpen your axe to get ready for race day and get things done at CIM. We've had some great topics in between those bookends, the training talk back in August, and tonight we talked about fueling and hydration. We really tackled that important topic, which is a key topic in preparing well for a marathon, both in training and race day. We might be able to touch on some of that again tonight. And then we also talked about managing the aches and pains through those dog days of training in October, to keep yourself on the road, healthy on the road to CIM. And like I said, here we are just 2.5 weeks out. And I know the nerves and the anxiety is starting to set in. And so our focus tonight is about trying to set you guys up to be as successful as you can be at CIM. Most of you, probably all of you, if you're on this call at this point, have put in a lot of hard work. And now it's about accessing that hard work to have the best day possible at CIM in 2.5 weeks. We've got a great panel of experts here tonight that will make up this panel to talk about this important topic and get you guys ready to just nail CIM this year. Before I introduce the panel or allow them to introduce themselves, let's just talk a little housekeeping as it relates to the CIM University and the format for which we're doing it here on Zoom. For those of you guys that haven't been to one of our CIM universities yet, we do this on Zoom. It's important on Zoom for everyone to stay muted. But it is supposed to be as interactive as we can make it. So we will have the opportunity for you to ask questions along the way, and we're definitely going to save time at the end for any questions that you have. If you want to ask questions, the easiest way is to either type it into the chat. We'll monitor the chat and we'll get to those questions as we go. Either we'll slide them in if they're relevant to a topic we're talking about, or we'll get to them at the end. The other thing you can do, if it's maybe a more complicated question that's too difficult to type in the chat, is you can use the raise hand function in Zoom. If we see the raised hand and we find a break in it in time, we'll be able to slide that question in and allow you to ask the question of the panel. You can unmute yourself and then ask the question. The other thing is we're recording this session. It'll be posted on the Sacramento Running Association YouTube page and on the CIM University page. So if you want to go, if you missed anything, you're taking notes, or you have to slide away, use the restroom, grab dinner, whatever, you can go back and watch this entire CIM University, as well as our previous CIM University. We just posted in the chat a link to our previous CIM Universities, so you can watch those back to pick up any important tips or tricks that you might have missed. Especially that fueling and hydration one. We like I said, we might be able to talk about a little bit of that tonight, but we spent an entire session just talking fueling and hydration during the marathon. So there we are. Those are the ground rules. We're ready to go. We've got our housekeeping done. Now let's dive into CIM University number 4, perfecting the taper and building a strategy for race day for you guys to nail CIM. Let's look at our panel. Again, my name is Scott Abbott. I'm the executive director of the Sacramento Running Association and the California International Marathon. I'll be able to speak to a lot of things that are around the races in terms of logistics of a race weekend. If you have any questions tonight, well, let's get them answered. There's no question that's off limits as it relates to CIM. Even if it's at the end, we can ask, even if it's really a specific question to your situation, we're going to try to help you get all those questions answered. And now I'd like to introduce the rest of our expert panel. This is an amazing panel with tons of experience helping athletes get ready for not just marathons in general, but specifically for CIM. Let's start in the bottom right of my screen with Jeremy.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jeremy Donati. I'm a coach with Fleet Feet Sacramento. This is my 6th year coaching with Fleet Feet at the Sacramento location. I have been a runner for 10 years. I lost quite a bit of weight, over 100 pounds, and I took up running to find a new healthy outlet to be able to continue with those healthy goals. This would have been my 10th CIM in a row. Unfortunately, COVID kind of kicked that, but this will be my 9th CIM. So I've enjoyed training with my trainees, and I've also enjoyed working with them and kind of experiencing the same aches and pains along the way. So I'm excited to be a part of tonight, and I look forward to helping you guys answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Jeremy. Of course, Fleet Feet helps us operate the official CIM training program. So that Fleet Feet training program, which Jeremy has been a part of as one of our coaches, is the official CIM training program that prepares athletes, not just locally and regionally, but even nationally through an online program for the California International Marathon. All right, Terry, you're up.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
My name's Terry, and I go by Turbo Terry, not that I'm fast. So I'm one of the head coaches for Fleet Feet in Davis. And so my role is really, I get to help Sean oversee the Davis part of the program, get coaches and my trainees excited. And I like to bring excitement to our training program. I've been running with Fleet Feet for about 8 years, and then coaching for them for about 4 or 5 years. Have a ton of fun doing it. I feel like everyone has a running journey. My journey started after my horse passed away, and kind of started running as an outlet, and been running 10, 15 years since. So really enjoy it. Really like the therapeutic side of it. And I especially really just love bringing the passion to running to other runners. When you see people go from maybe the shortest distance they've ever ran is 3 miles, and just celebrating that with them. So being able to bring the set of runners for CIM to the finish line at 26.2 is an amazing journey. And I'm been having a ton of fun with my online coaching and with the our Davis group.
Great,
so
thank
you.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Terry. And then finally, Coach Worm, as he is affectionately known, but Chris Worman.
Thanks, Scott. Yeah, I'm known as Chris Wehrman, of course, my proper name, but Coach Worm up here in Chicago, where it's a little bit colder than what you're dealing with. I am a former runner and now the coach and co-founder of Run Better app, which is an app that allows athletes to run the specific courses on a treadmill. It tells you how to adjust the treadmill based on your pace to run actual courses. Before that, I was a professional marathoner, ran at 2 Olympic trials. I coach at Edge Athlete Lounge in Chicago and do a lot of work for the Chicago Marathon. One of the things that I have come to really love about running as I've slowed down and as I've retired is really being able to reflect on the journey of the race, of the season, of the friendships, and the personal growth, and love to be able to give back to the community and be engaged in the community and really try to help athletes maximize their potential, whether they achieve their goals or not, so they can really enjoy running and enjoy that journey that I think is so important.
Great, thanks. Welcome, Coach Worm, Jeremy, and Terry. Let's get started here. So here we are, 2.5 weeks out. Let's just briefly talk a little bit about these final 2 weeks. That's what's staring us right in front of the face, right in front of every runner's face. They got 2.5 weeks to go. It's a time of kind of antsiness, I think, emotionally, but also physically. There's the idea of this taper as you kind of get ready and get your body ready, and that sends off all sorts of different feelings amongst everybody. But let's just talk, maybe I'll start with you, Jeremy, and just what's the focus of these final weeks of training? What's just the general focus and mindset that runners should be having as they approach these final couple of weeks of training?
I kind of approach the taper as kind of your pre-celebration kind of for all the training you've done. You hit that last 20 or 22, you hit your peak week with mileage. And so you get into taper. Oh, okay. So you get into taper and you're feeling like, okay, I can run these miles, but you do get kind of antsy because, you want the mileage to drop so that, you can kind of recover from the aches and pains. There are kind of some aches and pains that start appearing and you think, something is wrong. But the taper for me, is kind of enjoying all the work that I've done over the last 15 or 16 weeks, building my mileage, building the long runs, building the speed. So I really do enjoy the taper weeks because I get to eat a lot because I'm still burning all the calories from when I was running all that. And then you kind of get enjoyment because you're not spending as much time running. So that's kind of my taper.
Yeah. Great, thanks. And Terry, and I also think it's kind of fun for especially some of our newer marathoners. At first, when they stared at that training schedule I talked about at the beginning, and they were looking at runs 6-8 miles. I've never run, Terry, you mentioned it. I've never run more than 3 miles, and then I got to run 6, 8, and then later I'm going to have to run long runs of 16, 18, maybe 20 miles. And then now they get into that taper and it's I only have to run 12 miles this weekend. And you can think all the way back to yourself in August that thought that 12 miles was maybe something you could never do. And then now that's this hey, it's just nothing, 12 miles in my taper. So that's also kind of a fun feeling, that sense of accomplishment. I think that's what you're talking about there in terms of celebrating the taper a little bit.
Exactly.
But Terry, maybe talk a little bit about big mistakes that people can make during these final 2 weeks. Some of that anxiety start to creep in. People can do some weird things, or it pushes us to do weird things. What are some mistakes that you see people make, or you want to encourage people to stay away from?
During the taper week, I feel like it's a great time to start fine-tuning everything. So now's the time to make your mistakes, before race day. So a lot of times people want to, they even show up on race day and still they are off with they're decided to go out for pizza and beer the night before, so if you're going to make those mistakes, now's the time to make it. So, during these runs, these tapering runs, you're like, ooh, that didn't work for me. So some things to make sure you focus on is start fine tuning your nutrition. How do you hydrate prior to your race? Are you hydrating 3 days prior, 2 days prior? Are you giving a good mix of both water and electrolytes? Now's the time to be fine tuning. I like to say what not to do. So that way, when it comes to race day, that going out for Thai food before your 12-mile run didn't set with you very well. And it gives you a chance to evaluate. I had chicken and sweet potatoes, and I had a great run on Saturday. And then you start thinking, wow, maybe that's my go-to food. So definitely time to look at what works and practice it, start practicing.
Yeah, I think that's all along the way. I know getting into those, long runs, or a lot of times to really kind of practice, your routine, and you should be dialing in what works. And I think you're hitting on an important point. Don't really try anything drastically new. And if you do stumble across something that doesn't sit well with you or work well for you, you're right. You've made that mistake. You can get that out of your meal plan, or maybe it's clothing that you wear that just didn't feel right. This is a chance to kind of try out some of those things. I think that's great in terms of trying things out, getting ready, and really kind of fine tuning towards race day. Coach Worm, is there any like simulation or target workouts that they should be looking at to kind of prepare them both physically, but maybe more importantly, mentally for the task at the marathon?
Well, hopefully the athletes have already done something along those lines. I mean, once we're getting into taper time, as has been pointed out, you don't want to start making drastic changes in your training. Now is the time with the proverbial hay in the barn that you want to stay sharp and you want to stay healthy. And you're going to be going through a number of changes, as Coach Jeremy said. You're going to be hungrier, you're going to have more free time. Your nerves are certainly going to ratchet up, especially over the next couple of weeks. And so making changes now and putting additional stress on your body that's not necessarily part of your training plan can be detrimental. But it is important to have a sense as to where you're going and what your race plan is going to be. And you need to obviously look at the totality of the work that you had put in up to this point in time and the last few weeks of your runs. Maybe it's a tempo run or a half marathon tune-up race or some of your long runs to be able to prepare that. And if you are going to try to put in one or two more runs, this would be the week to do it so that you still have the opportunity to recover. And for me, a target run at this point may only be a 5 or 6 mile tempo run where you're running at maybe half marathon pace. So you're running faster than marathon pace, but you're not going all out because you don't want to put that much stress on your body, but you want to do something where you're challenging yourself a little bit. And frankly, if it goes well, then you should feel like you're in a good place for the marathon. If it doesn't go great, running that faster pace doesn't mean you won't be able to run a slower pace for a longer period of time over the marathon. So it's really more about the mental piece of it than is the physical piece at this point in the race.
Yeah, I think that's really great advice. In general, going back to mistakes that can be made, one of the biggest mistakes you can make is doing just too much in these final 2 weeks. And I think sometimes, especially when you put so much work in and you keep checking these boxes, you want to kind of go in. I think sometimes our anxieties take over and we want to go into our race feeling like there's some sort of guarantee, like I know I'm ready. I've shown myself I'm ready. Well, sometimes we do stuff like that in those final 2 weeks. And we kind of leave our race out there on a training run. Like we do a week out, we do some monster workout or some big run, or we feel like, hey, I haven't done enough. And so I want to try to squeeze something in. That might work, when you were in high school the night before a test, cramming, but it doesn't work in marathon training. Your body needs time to adapt and recover from everything you do. So you can't really crash train and squeeze anything in. So I think that's a big mistake that I think is made. People are trying to squeeze too much in those final 2 weeks. Coach Worm said it great. The hay is in the barn at this point. It's about getting mentally and physically ready. One more point about these final weeks here. If you are dealing with any aches and pains, what's the best approach at this point? Is it better to just like dial way back and get to the start line healthy? Is it trying to run through stuff? I mean, I know that kind of maybe seems like an easy loaded question, but it is something that I think a lot of people struggle with because they're so worried about getting those final runs in on the schedule. But what is the philosophy there? Anybody from the panel can jump on that.
Well, I would say that one thing that I think almost every athlete that's listening and is tapering for a race will feel these last few weeks is aches and pains. You run 15 weeks up to this point in time through the heat, the summer, and then you're dealing with the humidity and the breakdown of your muscles, and you're tearing them down, and you're being dehydrated, and you're exhausted, and so you get used to the aches and the pains and the fatigue. Now you're starting to be rested, and you start to really focus on how your body is feeling. So you're going to feel a lot of aches and pains. I think the biggest mistake is that people, counter to the overdoing it these last 3 weeks or 2.5 weeks, is that they end up doing too little these last 2.5 weeks. After all of this training, Yeah, your body is used to being fatigued. Doesn't mean you want to be fatigued when you get into the race, but you don't want to back off so much that your body is kind of out of sorts. So it's really about managing how you're feeling and recognizing that you may have more aches and pains now, but you're just more aware of them and not necessarily in a position where you are coming up with injuries kind of out of the blue.
Yeah, great. Anybody want to add to that? Or I think that covers it pretty good. All right, let's kind of shift away from, I know that's what's staring everybody in the face right now, this just upcoming 2 weeks, but let's try to move forward to race weekend. Jeremy, maybe talk a little bit about the importance of just kind of having a race weekend plan in general. I'm not talking about the race itself, but just the plan for the weekend in terms of just being stress-free to try to, well, at least try to be as stress-free as possible as you get yourself to the start line, and the impact that can have on your race if you can give yourself as stress-free approach as possible on race weekend.
Absolutely. Like, I think that's one of the keys for me is I have, you know, for all the marathons I've done, I kind of have a ritual of the race week so that I, you know, from when I'm getting my hair cut, because I got to look good, to, you know, like what I'm doing for eating and when I'm going to sleep and when I'm eating the, you know, the night before. I find a lot of stress involved in that race week when I don't have a plan as far as what I'm doing. Right. So I like to know when I need to be at the bus pickup, and I like to know, you know, I like to plan that morning. I like to plan the Saturday and the Friday. Okay, this is what I'm doing, you know, nails to bolts, everything's got, you know, so I'm looking at, okay, I'm going to be off my feet. I'm going to be wearing compression sleeves. I'm going to be, I'm, you know, eating at these times. Okay, I'm going to run a small shakeout run on Saturday. I really find comfort in having my week planned out, and it really lowers my stress level a lot, that I'm not second guessing why I'm running a marathon. So for me, that enables me to actually enjoy the race, to enjoy the expo, because I have a plan. Okay, getting my haircut Friday, then I'm going to go over to the expo and pick up my packet. I'm going to get off my feet. So I really find comfort in having a plan because there's such a mental component in the marathon, and there's so many things in your head telling you can't run the marathon. So I'm constantly trying to cut all of those things out by just having, you know, my plan of attack, and this is what I'm doing. And it helps me. I mean, that's why I continue to run marathons, because I can lower that stress level in order to do it.
Yeah. Does anybody else on the panel want to add to that?
I'd like to add, I think it's the best time. I mean, if this is your first or your 10th or 20th like marathon, the feeling that you have prior to race week, I mean, just soak it in, because this is an amazing accomplishment. You've worked so hard to get to this point. And the biggest thing is to trust your training. So knowing that you're trusting your training, it's going to get you to the finish line. And you can and this is the mental component when it comes to race week, is you can let your anxiety eat you up and give you all the negative doubts, but you just have to shine above that because you've worked so hard. You know you're going to be amazing. Tell yourself you're amazing. Your body's going to do amazing things. And then when you cross that finish line, the emotional journey of the week leading up to the race is you want to savor that. So enjoy that feeling, the anticipation.
Yeah, but to add to that, I think it's important, and Terry's absolutely right, is to have your race plan, which should be already prepared. And if you haven't, you should certainly do it before the end of this weekend, and then not deviating from it, right? Because, you know, as both Terry and Jeremy said, you know, you have your plans, but you're going to be nervous, you're going to be anxious, you're going to start second guessing. You're going to start feeling fatigue and the nerves. And one of the big mistakes is that then people decide that they're going to change their race plan, either going out faster or going out slower, whether they feel good or they don't feel good. But at the end of the day, the race plan should be based on how you feel 2 days before the race. It's based on the 18 weeks of work that you had done up to the race. And so, go through those motions and have the plan, but then don't start to second guess yourself, because that's where you're going to have a fatal approach to the race. And that's where things are really going to fall apart.
That's excellent advice, because that does happen. Your anxieties will overcome you, and then you start making changes. And you're right. You've done the work over 18 weeks. You've set yourself up. And honestly, when you start focusing on the things you can control race weekend, and you start kind of planning those things out, and then almost like checking boxes, it kind of gets you on this roll of success a little bit, and it kind of perpetuates itself right into race day. All of those checklists and things, if you are hitting your markers all along the way, it could lead right up to, mile 1, I want to hit this pace, and you go out and do that, and you've just been rattling off all these tiny wins along the way. Like, got my packet when I thought I was going to get my packet, parked where I thought I was going to park, got on the bus I thought I was going to get on, set my alarm, didn't hit Zoom, didn't hit snooze, and all of a sudden you start stacking these wins. It just kind of sets you up to like, hey, everything I set out to do, I'm going to do. And then the same thing happens when that gun goes off, and you start checking your boxes of when you're going to take your goos, when you're going to drink your hydration, and what pace you're going to run. And once you just start checking those boxes, it just sets you up to be successful. And so that the importance of that plan is key. So it may even feel silly to just write it all out, but once you start writing it out and have it all laid out, and you just start checking those boxes, it can really set you up to have a successful day. And this might be a good time to really talk about some of those logistics before we get into the race itself. I know there's been a lot of questions in the chat about buses and different things. Let's talk a little bit about just the race weekend logistics. One thing you're going to do is before, 10 days out, starting 10 days out, just start checking the weather. Okay. Obviously race organizers, we're going to be checking the weather. So and I know you guys are going to be too. That just helps you kind of mentally get a framework for how the weekend's going to go. It can guide a lot of decisions you're going to make with regards to maybe your clothing and the gear you're going to bring to the race. So that's important. I also think it's important for you guys, I'm kind of listing off some things here, to have somebody in your life that's going to be with you. And even if they're not going to be with you, if you're traveling here and you're at home, but kind of designate someone that can kind of run air traffic control for you. Because you're going to have a lot of people in your life that are going to be texting you saying, hey, I want to follow you. Where do I find tracking? Where can I watch? Where's a good spot to spectate? And if you're pulled in 19 different directions, answering everybody's questions, that can stress you out. So sometimes have a significant other, a friend that can kind of take the reins of that process for you, and can say, hey, if you have any questions about, Jeremy's race, run them at me. I'll tell you where to track, where if you want to watch, so that you're not getting pinged with a bunch of those questions. That person can be a huge help to you. I encourage you to do that as well. But then now get into the logistics of the race. The expo is on Friday and Saturday at the convention center. If you're coming from out of town, make sure you know where that is. Make sure you know what the parking situation is like around there. Check to see where your hotel is relative to the expo, so that all those things are as stress-free as possible. When you get to the expo, you're going to have a QR code that makes your packet pickup really, really easy. Bring that QR code, they'll scan it, you'll get your bib, your shirt. You can enjoy the expo. There's gonna be a lot of great speakers and panels just like this one. There's info booths for you to get all questions answered, and really just kind of enjoy that and get you kind of set up for race day. And then a couple things about race morning to keep track of. I know busing is getting to the start line is huge. You want to plan that out ahead of time. If you haven't already started to look at the transportation options of how you get to the start line, you need to do that as soon as possible. CIM is a point-to-point race. It starts in Folsom, which is 26 miles from downtown, the state capital, where the race finishes. Depending on where you're staying, you're going to have to get out to the start line. There's really only two ways to get to the start line. You either get up to the start line through one of our start line buses or through one of the drop-off shuttles. The start line buses will leave from downtown Sacramento near the downtown hotels. They leave at 5 o'clock and they drive you all the way up to the start line. There are other remote hotel clusters that have start line buses that will take you up to the start line as well. If you're someone who wants to get dropped off up near the start line, like you live there, or you want to take Uber, you have a friend that can drive you near the start line, they can drive you pretty close to the start line. Within about 2 miles of the start line, they can drop you off there, and then you can take one of our shuttles from there to the start line. Okay, there's no way to drive and just park yourself at the start line. As close as you can get is one of those drop-off shuttles, but there's no parking at those drop-off shuttle spot, so you need someone to drop you off there. So again, you need to look through all that stuff, make sure you have your plan. Hopefully I answered a lot of those questions. If people have specific questions about their situation, we can try to answer those in the chat. But that's kind of the busing thing. One other key logistical piece that I want to touch on in terms of your plan, I talked a little about gear and weather, is think about is knowing our gear check policy at CIM. We do not have a start area gear check. We only have finish area gear check. So you can drop off any gear that you want at the finish line that you want to have after the race, warm clothes, dry clothes that you want to have after the race. Maybe it's your ID for the beer garden, whatever. That can go in a gear check bag that you'll get at Pack and Pick Up, and you can drop it off at the finish line. If you're taking buses from downtown, you can drop it off in the morning before you get on the bus at gear check, but it's also open all day Saturday during the expo. You can go down to the finish line and drop off your bag, and then that's there and it'll be there for you at the finish. You can't take any gear to the start that'll get transported to the finish line. Anything you bring to the start, you'll have to discard it there, and then we collect those clothes and we donate them to charity. So if it's going to be a cold, wet morning for some reason, you're going to want to bring an old sweatshirt or an old jacket or a garbage bag or something to keep yourself dry up to the start line, and then you'll discard those clothes there, but they won't be transported to the finish line. So just kind of think about those types of things and really plan ahead. Again, if these are things you're trying to figure out on the fly, it's going to make for a stressful race week and a stressful race morning. In terms of other logistics, and maybe you guys could talk a little bit about this, the start area itself, when you get to the start line, what are some things that they should be thinking about at the start line? I mean, obviously everybody needs to use the restroom and other stuff, but we've got pace teams like, Jeremy, talk a little bit about you. You're somebody who's been at our start line many times. What are some ways that they can have a stress-free time once they do get to that start line?
Yeah, I think when you get to the start line, just kind of taking a nice overview, taking a minute to just look around to see where all the porta potties are, which CIM has a lot of porta potties. It's amazing. But know where the porta potties are. Look at the start line and look at the chute to see, okay, my pace group is okay on the left side, or my pace group is on the right side. I always find, when I run other marathons, not CIM, that I'm so used to, is when I get to the start line, I just like to take kind of just a minute to just check everything out. Okay, because you're there, probably an hour before the race actually starts. Okay, there's where I need to get in the chute. Okay, there's where the porta potties are. Okay, I'm going to go stand over there because it, could be raining. Just knowing where, kind of where you can set up shop for a little while. That tends to help me just, again, lessening my stress level, just taking kind of an inventory of the start line. I mean, and CIM is not a small race. There will be quite a few people there. I mean, what is it at, Scott? 10,000? 10,000,
and we don't do wave starts, so everybody's there at the same time. That allows everybody to kind of get in the same pace groups and run together. So Jeremy, it's a good important point about finding your, we don't really have corrals that you're forced into. They're self-seated based on your pace time. So you're going to want to go find those. Our pace team leaders, they'll have red signs. They'll get into those corrals maybe 20 minutes before the race. So they'll have those signs. Go find your pace teamers, get behind them. Any other tips, maybe Coach Worm, anything about warm up or anything like that up there at the start line?
Yeah, people are always trying to save their energy, which makes a lot of sense. But at the same time, you're going to have a lot of nervous energy that you're going to want to try to burn up. I have always had my athletes early in the morning, a few hours before the race, go out and run like a 5-minute jog, nice and easy, just to try to get that blood flowing a little bit. And then when getting out to the race start, if you have the time and you have the space, even if you can get 2 or 3 minutes of a very light jogging before you start stretching, just to try to get some of those nerves out. You're not going to be tired from 3 or 4 or 5 minutes of jogging in the morning before you run 26.2 miles after training for 18 weeks. But you don't want to be up for 3 hours and then all of a sudden roll into the start line and trying to run, because that's usually not how people have run their long runs over the course of their training. You've usually for those long runs gotten up and run relatively early. So just trying to keep a little bit active without using up too much energy is a good way to burn off a little bit of that nervous energy, get your body nice and warm before that gun goes off.
Yeah, and to that point, Terry, anything from I think the fueling side of things pre-race, in terms of having a plan to what you're going to eat that morning, the timing of it, thinking about what time they're going to get on the bus, what they should eat. What are some tips you have for that whole process leading all the way up to the start of the race?
I think that's a very great and important question that a lot of runners face, is because everyone is different. And again, I want to go back to, this is stuff that you obviously have been practicing during your long runs. You want to think of digestion, and you want to think of how it's going to fuel you. So think about the meals that you've had on those long races. Have you had a light breakfast? What has worked? So, of course you want some protein, and you want your carbs, you want to carb load the night before, but mainly is making sure you're not doing anything that morning. That's because you're already dealing with nerves, which is going to deal with your overall whole anxiety system. So you don't want to eat anything that's going to upset your stomach, because again, we are dealing with porta potties and long lines. Just be smart about what you eat that morning. Make sure you're including some hydration in there, and definitely try to eat, even if you have to force yourself to eat, to get some fuel in your body. A lot of times it's early and you're not used to eating that early. That's the hardest part, but definitely. And then have a snack for you. So that way, because, you think about by the time you get up, eat breakfast, then you get to the bus, you take the bus, you have the 45-minute hour journey. Now you're like, all of a sudden everything's awake and you're like, wait, now I'm hungry. What do I have? So make sure you have something that works for you as far as an easy to go to snack. And then if you do any of your fueling, like your blocks prior to, just kind of time that out prior to your race.
Yeah, that's such a good point you just made right there, because, and Chris, you kind of teed that up by saying, hey, in our long runs on the weekends, a lot of times we're just hitting the alarm, rolling out of bed, throwing our shoes, maybe a quick bite or coffee, and then out the door. Well, here you're going to be, we're talking about 7 a.m. start, buses leaving at 5, maybe 5:30, depending on where you're staying. That means you're probably rolling out of the hotel somewhere around 4, because you're going to want to get to those buses early. A lot of people trying to get on buses, it takes a while to get them loaded. You're going to want to get there early, especially if you're dropping off a bag at the gear check area. So if you're eating something in your hotel room at 3:30, the race doesn't start till 7. That's 3.5 hours. If you don't have anything there, you're now starting the race pretty much on empty in terms of fuel. And so maybe the fueling plan you had in place, hey, I take a goo every half hour. Well, you're already empty before you start. That fueling plan was based on you starting maybe on a full tank. So I think that was a really good point you made, Terry, about maybe having some sort of snack out at the start line, or maybe your first goo you take or block you take is right at the start line, right before the race, just to kind of get you topped off before you get rolling. Let's now dive. Okay, here we go. That's all the prep stuff. Now let's get to the part that we've prepared for the last, so many weeks, 15, 16, 18 weeks. Gun goes off, we're running. Now we've got the challenge of 26 miles. Obviously I believe that all the people that are listening to this, the reason they're here is because they've done the work. These are people that are prepared properly. They're ready to go. They've set themselves up to have a great day. Now let's assume that they followed their plan. They show up stress-free, and that gun goes off. What is the most important thing for them to do from the gun to get to the tape and those 26 miles in between? What are those kind of key pieces at this point? Obviously, pacing is a big part of that. Let me start with you, Coach Worm.
Pacing is key. And the biggest challenge that I faced when I was running and that my athletes face is, because you are finally tapered, because you are rested, because once the gun goes off, those nerves that have kind of kept you slow and lethargic, all of a sudden you get this rush of adrenaline, is that you can run so much faster than you were in your training with such ease. And then on top of it, you're running, downhill, which you don't really realize. I saw earlier on the chat, someone had asked about pacers going out a little bit faster to put some, put some time in the bank. And I tell all of my athletes that, conceptually that makes sense, but in reality, it doesn't work. And so, we can talk about, and we will talk about getting to that finish line a little bit, but, if you go out 10 seconds a mile or 15 seconds a mile too fast, I mean, you can lose a minute to a minute and a half a mile on the back end. So you're not really saving that much. Conversely, if you go out, 10 or 15, 20, 30 seconds slower for the first 4 or 5 miles, where you're really keeping yourself under control, then you start rolling and feel good. You're able to push that wall back a little bit, which means you can finish stronger. So the key really is when that gun goes off, knowing what your plan is, sticking to that plan, and hopefully finding some people that you can run with that are running that same plan as you. Because if you can key off of each other, you're going to keep yourself honest, and you're going to really lead to a successful race day.
That's excellent advice. And in terms of finding people that run the same pace as you, that's easy at CIM. We got 10,000 people at the start line. Again, we don't do waves. So everybody starts at the same time. We're all broken up by paces. We've got great pace team leaders that have big signs. They should get you set up right on pace. Get behind those pace team leaders. They'll make sure you don't get out too fast. You made a really good point about that first mile being downhill and the excitement of the start. My rule of thumb for CIM is whatever whatever pace you're running at in that first mile, slow down. Whatever pace feels right, slow down from that, and you'll probably still be too fast. So really pull way back on the reins early, because what happens is it gets you going a little too fast, but you feel great, as Coach Worm said, and oh, hey, it's great. Maybe I'm going to have my day, or maybe I'm going to bank some time, and you start just rolling along and you get kind of caught in that groove of 10, 15, 20 seconds a mile too fast. But then you have to pay the bills on that at mile 18, 19, 20, 21. And then and then the wheels can really come off. So you have to show a lot of pace discipline. All the work you've done over the last 18 weeks can go out the window if you don't show pace discipline. So that's the most important thing you can do. Jeremy, do you want to piggyback on that a little bit as it relates to CIM, the pace team and a pacing strategy?
Absolutely. And, I think that's a key mistake people make, is going out too fast. And especially at CIM, when we don't have corrals, right? Everyone's starting when the gun goes off. So, I've seen athletes where they're really trying to hit their pace. And so they come out of the starting line and they are zigzagging around people and trying to hit that pace. And, they're actually ending up running a lot longer because, they're not taking the tangents. They're kind of trying to run around this 10,000 group of people. In actuality, like you said, if you're going 30 seconds slower than what you think, it's not going to make a bit of difference, but it will keep energy in your tank, right? And I think that's really what people need to be cognizant of. Don't try and, you hit the start line and you're going and you're surrounded by people. So just go with the flow. You just kind of have to let go at that point and run with the pace group, right? And the pace group might be a little slow, but don't spend useless energy trying to wiggle around people and go around, because you're just going to tire yourself out faster.
Yeah, Terry, do you have anything to add to that?
They all hit really good topics. I am guilty of it. I go out too fast and then pay the price towards the end. I always miss out on that final push. So definitely there's so much energy at the start line, so it's so hard not to. Everyone is just feeding off each other, and you feel good. The morning's crisp. So yeah, just really think about when you hit that start line is to take time to not go out fast, kind of slowly ramp it up. Like I always start my runners, tell them to start at least 30 to 45 seconds slower and then start increasing it by 15 seconds through the miles. And then they'll get to that pace, because you can get to that running pace by mile 3, it's thinned out. And then now you have a good steady, you're not leapfrogging over people. So, so don't be afraid. You have 26.2 miles to, it's like, it's different versus 5K versus 26 miles, 3 miles versus 26 miles. You have the time to get, to set that pace. So yeah, just think about that in the beginning, but everyone's guilty of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the danger of people thinking they're banking time and they're ahead of the chains, that never works. And use the pace teams as a guide. I sometimes tell people to start with the pace group behind your pace group, and you can see the pace group you want to run your way up into, and then you run your way up into that pace group. Then you might catch that pace group at mile 16, 17, 18. And at that point, you're now running a little faster than even they are, because you've caught them. You have that opportunity to roll right through them and go on and have that big day. Because really the CIM course is set up, and I'll let the coaches talk a little bit about this. It is set up for negative splits. The first, everyone thinks, oh, it's a net downhill course, so that must mean it's just a downhill race. It's definitely not. The first half of the race has pretty substantial rolling hills, no big climbs, but rolling hills. And then the second half of the race is pretty much pancake flat. So for the most part, you really want to set yourself up. The whole goal is to take advantage of those final 6 to 8 miles that you can race and run really, really well at CIM. And the only way you can do that is by being very, very careful in those early miles and checking way down, set yourself up, build a lot of momentum, keep the energy in reserve, and then really be able to attack those final 10 miles. That's really, and maybe you coaches, you could talk a little bit more specifically about the contours of the course and what that means at CIM from that perspective.
Well, just kind of piggybacking on you, Scott, you know, like, because of all the rolling hills, it is advantageous for people to go a little slower so that you are keeping more energy in the bank. I think people go out, you're going out faster, you actually have to expend more energy to go up and down over the rolling hills. So then you get to this flat piece right after the half and you turn on to Fair Oaks, and you don't have energy because you've been using up all your energy to go up and down the hills, when in actuality, that's when you should be, when you get to the Fair Oaks and you don't have the rolling hills like you have for the last, half of the race. That's when you should be expending your energy. That's when you kind of are able to cash in on the energy that you've built up, right? So don't go out. If you're going out too fast, you're just going to burn up.
And Coach Worm, I know it's a little late in the training process at this point, but you guys even, build that kind of course simulation for runners through your app that can help runners kind of really approach that type of thing and how to manage those different sections of the course, correct?
Yeah, that's exactly what it's for, really, to give athletes the opportunity to feel what a course is like before they get there, especially for the out-of-towners that don't have the opportunity to run the course itself. And, you don't have to run hard to be able to get a sense as to what the course is like. You don't have to do marathon pace to know what the course is like. You really want to be able to have a mental picture of what you're going to be going through, so that when you get to race day, when you get to the course, you're not surprised by anything. And that's exactly what the app allows athletes to do, so that they are prepared to run the course that they're getting ready to race. 18 weeks of training is a lot of time and energy, blood, sweat, and tears, right? And you don't want to then show up and realize that you've done 18 weeks of training and you're still not prepared because you didn't know what was coming. And that's exactly why we developed this app, to allow athletes to be ready.
Yeah. So, I think that app could be great for people. Even if you want to, do a treadmill run, just for one section of the course, but before the race, just especially some of the trickier sections that Jeremy was talking about, maybe the rolling hills, could be something to slide in over these final 2 weeks. But one thing I will pitch to everybody right now is, on our website, on the course information page, we have a course video tour. It's actually run through an app called NeuRun, NEURUN. You can download that app, and the course video tour is on there, and it goes through the entire course through a video, and it also stops at all the key spots where it identifies where all the hills are. It gives a lot of great coaching tips. Coach Worms even has a tip in there somewhere kind of in the middle of the race there about how to approach each section. It shows where all the aid stations are, what's offered at all those aid stations. So a very, very important app. It's about a 10 or 12 minute watch because it's sped up. I highly encourage everybody to watch that in terms of building your plan for race day. That should be a part of the next couple of weeks for you to watch that video at least once. You can take some notes and it'll help you build that plan. A couple of questions that are starting to kind of come in about this, asking about the pace groups. They actually run pretty darn close to even pace. That's kind of their job. They will not run negatives. I mean, they will not run positive splits. They do not bank time. Some of them might start a little slower, knowing that the hills in the first half, and then they'll try to catch up later. But when I say a little slower, they still try to get right on it. They're more of like guideposts for you to adjust off of. They're going to be right on pace, even splits. If you're someone who wants to run more of a negative split race, then stay back from them and run your way up into them. But they, for the most part, just try to be on the nose, and they usually are. They're the best in the business. There's 2 in every group, and so they'll run even pace. Here's a question that we get a lot. Maybe someone on the panel can take this. A lot of people that have done the 20-mile run, and they're just kind of like, God, that was tough. And I don't know how I'm going to go 6 more miles, at that pace, or just to run 6 more miles, period. Just that anxiety that people have. And I think it forces people into doing too much during the taper period, because they're like, well, 20 was tough. Maybe I should go try to do a 24 just to, how do you kind of deal with that feeling of 20 miles was tough, 20 miles at this pace was tough. How am I going to close it out?
Well, I can tell you this, and this is based on lots of experience and lots of fails. And I think the first thing that's very important for all athletes to understand is that you should not have the expectation that you're going to get through 26.2 miles without any challenges. As a coach and as an athlete, the wall is going to be there. If things go well, the wall is later on in the race. If things don't go well, it's earlier in the race. But at some point, you're going to hit the wall. But you have to remember that through the 18 weeks of training, you have trained hard, you've pushed yourself, you've increased in your paces, your distances, and your efforts. And you've now set yourself up for success in the race by following your race plan and recognizing how tough you are as an athlete, and that you know that you're going to go through some of these challenges and that you're capable of doing so. So when you get to that point in the race, at 20 miles, it's not about whether or not you've run longer than 20 miles in your long run or not. It's really about the body of work that's allowing you now to push through the pain or the discomfort and the fatigue for that last 10K. And what people don't always appreciate is that when you're running your 20-miler, you may have a small training group with you. You're doing it usually at the end of the longest week or set of weeks over at that point, 15 weeks of training. And when you're in the race, you are tapered, you are rested, although when you hit 20 miles, you got 20 miles on your belt, but you're also with 10,000 other runners. You're going to have family, friends, loved ones, teammates, coaches, crowd. You're going to have so much support that you can really rely on. And frankly, you'll have the opportunity to use other people in the race that you're competing against, because even though you're racing against the distance and you're racing against the time, there's still people that you're competing against. And so if you're feeling just a little bit better than someone else ahead of you, and you can catch them, or you can put your head down and go get them, then that can help with each successive mile when you've hit the wall or you're coming up to the wall to get you from mile 20 to mile 26.2. So it will come together. And the hope, of course, is that that wall just comes late, but you'll be able to get there as long as you really focus, bear down, and trust in yourself.
It's a great point, and honestly, I will give you the point. The question you're asking is the age old. People ask that question. Is the age old question. Everybody deals with that same uncertainty. Even elite professional marathoners, I talk to them all the time, and Coach Worm was one of them. He could speak to that. Where you have these workouts where you're like, God, marathon pace for just that short amount of time was tough. How am I going to do this for 26 miles? And then it just happens. That's the magic of the marathon. And what makes the marathon so special is a little bit of that uncertainty. If it was something you knew you could do, then why would we be sitting here on this Zoom right now? And why are we going through all this trouble? And why do we put the big stickers on the back of our cars that say 26.2? That's the magic of the marathon, is that uncertainty. Your job in training is to make yourself set up as best you can to take on that challenge of those final 6 to 8 miles. And if you manage everything well in your training, your preparation, and then also your pacing and your fueling strategy for those first 16 to 18 miles, you've now given yourself the best chance to really attack that challenge. And then if you do, and you're successful, and you've drawn a lot of those things that Coach Worm was talking about, the excitement of the day, the excitement of the moment, the excitement of the opportunity, that's when you have that special day. And that's what makes that finish line so special. Like nothing else in our sport is a marathon finish line, especially when you're seeing people accomplish those goals. And CIM maybe a race more than any others, because of the contours of our course and how forgiving those final 6 miles are, really sets people up to have those great days and those exciting finishes. So that's a great question, I think, that really kind of brings together a lot of what we talked about. There was another question that I don't want to miss here as we kind of get, and again, we still have a few minutes here. So anybody that's got questions, even if they seem ultra specific about a bus you want to take or something like that, we'll hang in here and get them answered. But one more general question that I want to touch on a little bit, someone asked about the hydration and fueling strategies. I know we had an entire Zoom about that, or entire CIM University. So first of all, I want to encourage whoever wants to have a deeper dive, watch that. There was a really good, we went through all the aid stations, what's offered on course. And so that's a great, if you've got time, watch that CIM University. But in terms of just, in a quick couple minutes here, let's talk about fueling and hydration. I mean, those are the two things. Pacing, which we spent a lot of time on. I think we hammered that point. The other is fueling and hydration. Those two pieces together are going to be, if you've prepared properly, are going to be what ensure your success on race day. So let's talk about hydration. What, maybe Terry, let's start with you. What's the most important thing from a hydration standpoint and utilizing those 17 aid stations on course?
Very important, hydration, especially taking in the electrolytes. So making sure that you find a balance. So a lot of people still, they run with their running pack, that's fine, but CIM course is so well supported that you almost don't need anything. It is a very well supported course, but definitely have a strategy. So for example, my strategy is I always take electrolytes at the noon at the aid stations, because I know, even if it's cold, you're sweating. And the last thing you need is you're sweating out and then you start cramping, because nobody wants to be at that final miles when you're cramping. It's the worst. So think about that. Think about taking in, and then of course balancing it with water, but don't skip out on the electrolytes. Even if you're not thirsty, just take sips if you can. Very, very, very important.
Yep, and somebody asked about hyponatremia. That's rare. You would have to drink a ton of water during a marathon, even on a cold day. That's not something. So I wouldn't be worried about drinking too much water. It's just the balance of your fueling and hydration. Maybe one of the other coaches can dive into maybe the fueling a little bit and how it balances with the hydration.
Well, I was just going to say, Scott, we're talking about this, but the reality is everyone should already have that plan in place, because, part of what Terry and I discussed in the training groups is, okay, this is your first long run. Okay, what's your strategy? Like, that's what I've been, hammering home for the last 17 weeks with the training group. It's, what is your strategy? Okay, I had a trainee that, I was asking him how his long run went, and he said, oh, it was good. Like, okay, what was your fueling? He's like, oh, I had 3 chomps. And I said, 3 chomps for the whole 16 miles? And he's, yeah. I said, well, they recommend, every 45-ish minutes, you should be taking in about 100 calories. Oh, he tried that the next weekend and felt, 100 times better.
You didn't mean 3 packets of chomps, just
No.
3 actual chomps.
Three actual chomps.
Yeah, that's not enough.
That's not enough. So
Yeah.
I mean, I think, I really hope everyone on this Zoom has been practicing what their plan is for race day, right? My fueling strategy is I take, a GU 5 minutes before the race starts, and then every 40 minutes they're on. And, like Terry said, I'm always an advocate for just sweeping through an aid station and grabbing some electrolyte and getting as much in my mouth as I can and not getting it all over my face. But, I think people in the beginning think that I'm feeling great. Like I don't need to grab the electrolyte, or, oh, I'm going to, push the time a little bit longer before I take my next GU. The reality is, like, if you're not being methodical and taking it what you planned at, you're going to get to a certain point and you're just going to have no gas left. And whatever you do, however much you try and take at that point, your body's already past the point at which. So I really, for people on the Zoom, I really hope that you have already been practicing your fueling and hydration, and you kind of have it in your mind. Okay, I'm taking, like Terry said, hydration at every aid station. It's just, a little cup of hydration. And then I'm gooing or chomping or whatever you're doing every 30, 40, 45 minutes. And you have that, and you've worked that out already. Because I think we're, 2 weeks before the race, if you're still trying to figure out your fueling and hydration strategy, I think you might be behind the curve. So I'm happy to answer any questions on that or with the panel, but, I really hope that people already have that planned.
Yeah, or you have this last long run this weekend to potentially kind of start to really dry run some of that. And that's maybe leads us into another question we have. And Coach Worm, maybe you can take this. Wondering, I know the question's about everybody's different and depending on what plan you're on, but how many miles this weekend on a long run? This person that's asking the question is saying that they want to do 18 to 20. To me, that seems like a little much 2 weeks out from the race. What's the kind of, I know there's not a magic number, but relatively, what should people be kind of, especially if they're going to use it as a kind of a dry run to practice some fueling or maybe practice the clothes they're going to wear? Well, how long are we looking at for this weekend's long run, which is really the last long run for the most part?
Yeah, and that really is a loaded question because it depends on what the training program is. But I have had athletes run a 20 miler 2 weeks out for different reasons. Usually it's because there was something that impeded the ability to do so, the week before or 2 weeks before. If it's a 20 miler for the first time and you'd only run up to 15 or 16 miles for your long run, that's an awful big jump to try to get that 20 miler in with all of a sudden, a very short 2 weeks to recover. Because at the end of the day, it takes 3, 4, 5 days for that recovery to set in before you really start to taper. So then you're only going to give yourself maybe 7 or 8 days to taper. But if you've been otherwise slowly increasing your miles, and if the plan has that written, I'm certainly not going to say don't do it. But I saw that question, and what was actually more concerning, I guess that's maybe not the right word, but what I'd be more cautionary about is not necessarily running 18 or 20 miles this weekend, but then turning around and potentially running 15 miles next weekend, because then you're really pushing that last long run, I think, too close to race day. And you're not giving your body the opportunity to fully recover before you get into the race. And that's really what you want to be feeling. And so, 20 miles to me, I think is maybe a little bit long. 18, maybe pushing it. I usually have the last 3 long runs for my athletes as maybe 10 or 11 the week before the race, 13 to 15 2 weeks before the race, and they're then 20 milers 3 weeks before the race. And I find that to be a nice reduction that allows people to feel good, not be too rested, but also make sure that they are ready to be recovered on race day.
Yeah, and just the theory of adaptation at this point in recovery and everything, there's very little you're going to be able to do that's going to help you from a training standpoint in these final 2 weeks. It is about sharpening up. So if you're just trying to squeeze in one more long run, like you said, that big jump up to 18 or 20, just to check the box to say, hey, I did a 20 miler before the marathon, the risk that you may be running of maybe leaving your marathon out there on a training day, is I think too great a risk. It's almost better to go to the start line. I always say it's better to go to the start line, 95% trained and 100% healthy than it is to go 100% trained, but 95 or 90% healthy. You're probably okay at 95% healthy, but the problem is you go for that 20-mile long run this weekend and you could end up 65 or 70% healthy. And I'm not just saying from an injury standpoint, a lack of recovery standpoint as well. So ultimately, sometimes we just get caught up and we've got to do all these little things in training and put all the pieces of the puzzle together. But in general, it's the totality of the work that you've done over 18 weeks, not one run or one workout that you do in those final 2 weeks. And I think that's really important for people to remember. I appreciate it. Looks like, if there's any other questions that people have, you can slide them in this chat. We might be able to grab them here over the final few minutes here, but I want to just take this opportunity to thank our panel. You guys did an excellent job. This is great information. Most of them will be at the expo, a part of our expert panels there. I encourage you guys to come watch those expert panels at the expo, swing by some of the booths and get these questions answered. Meet with our PACE team is at the expo. They're a great resource for you as well. Make sure you read all the information on the website about logistics and just have your plan as we've preached. And most importantly, I think this was echoed by everybody on here. Don't go out too fast. Don't try to bank time. Really be disciplined with your pacing plan, and that'll set you up, I think, to have a great day at CIM. So again, thank you to our panel. Thank you for all of you guys who've been on the journey of the CIM universities on this road to CIM. We're going to see everybody in just about 2.5 weeks. Remember, this is going to be up on YouTube and on our website with all our other CIM universities. All right. Good luck to everybody. Thank you guys very much.